Hey, I'm Laurie Hernandez, and this is One Creative Mind. Cory Richards is one of the world's most accomplished alpinists. He's also an award-winning international photographer and filmmaker whose iconic images have appeared on the covers of National Geographic magazine. Both professionally and physically, he's attained the highest of highs, all while managing a variety of mental health conditions like the bipolar disorder he was diagnosed with as a young teen. He's a master at documenting the human story, and today he joins us to share his story. So, Cory, it is so wonderful to have you with us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a huge pleasure.
I can't wait to speak with you. And viewers, feel free to post questions or comments in the chat section at any time. And if you know anyone who can benefit from the information in today's webcast, please share this video with them. So, Cory, people may be surprised to learn that someone with a lifelong passion for adventure, whose vocation demands peak mental and physical health, has also lived with parallel mental health challenges from a very young age. So if you don't mind, take us back to the beginning. How did you first know that you were struggling with your mental health?
Well, I mean, this is again, I'm going to try to be very short here, but my mom took me to see a psychologist when I was 1. And that, I think, is a very strange thing. But to her credit, I think she noticed something was slightly, something was different. And now when you're 1 year old, you're in this very, very, how would I say it? You're in basically your earliest childhood development. So you're sponging the world in a way that, has profound impact later on in life. And so what she was noticing was likely not genetic, but a response to something that was happening already in our family dynamic. Now, that's not to say that we didn't have a great family. We did. They loved me. They still love me with so unconditionally, it's hard to comprehend. But as I grew into my adolescence, I was a smart kid. I was a gifted kid. I went to high school 2 years early. And then all of a sudden my grades just dropped. And at the same time, my relationship with my brother was he's 2 years older, was unraveling. And I'll say my brother is my truest love in my whole life. I mean, I've always loved and really looked up to him. And at the same time, with his own struggles, our relationships became very oppositional, and as we both grew into our adolescent bodies, became very physically violent. And my grades fell off, and we went to see somebody about it, and I got diagnosed with major depression or clinical depression, and then it unraveled further. I dropped out of high school. And then I ended up in a inpatient, outpatient treatment facility for 8 months, where I was diagnosed with bipolar 2. And that was when I was 14. And again, when you look at this stuff, it's all placed in, we're not born with bipolar disorder. We're not born with these, with mental health issues. We're born with the genetic encoding for them. And then we have trauma that triggers it. And realistically, all mental health issues are an extension or manifestation of trauma. That's it. And we're learning that, and it's becoming more and more clear all the time. So now the journey is, how do we unravel that?
That experience growing up with your brother, as someone who my brother is the same to me. That is my best friend, my rock, my foundation. Same thing with my older sister. I'm the youngest of 3. So family is everything. But that feeling of arguing and the disconnecting, was that a lonely feeling? Is that something that you felt isolated while it was happening, or what was that like for you?
Honestly, it was just a feeling of confusion, because as much as I loved him, he didn't have that same, I think there was on a base level a deep innate love for me because I'm his brother. And I want to be very clear that we have since really mended our relationship. We're both in our 40s now, and I couldn't understand why this person who I looked to so profoundly with so much love didn't want me in the same way. And so was it isolating? Yes. And I think that carried over into the rest of my life, where I actually chose a career path that was predicated by high risk and chaos, which mirrored the sort of the violence and tumultuousness of adolescence, and also mirrored the isolation of those experiences. You know, I've often felt like, if I'm being honest, and you know, I've often looked at the world from an outside perspective and felt so much love for it, to the point of being moved to tears quite often, and then a sense that somehow that's not for me. I don't belong to that. And so my whole career and my life path has been outside of that, you know, it's almost like I've been trying to get to interpret it and capture it in a way that then I can ultimately feel it. And ironically, it ended up isolating me even more.
Yeah. What are some of the difficulties in undertaking dangerous life or death endeavors while at the same time navigating a mental health condition like bipolar or depression? I know you touched on it a bit, but I feel like the juggle must have been difficult as well too, or was it something that gave you lots of freedom?
Well, it gave me lots of freedom, but it also was innate, right? There's a sense of like risking my life in order to save it. But how it plays out is that, you know, I've absolutely encountered situations where my reactivity or you know, sort of being when you're not in stasis, that can damage or even endanger a situation like a climb or something like that. So on the downside of it, you have to be, you know, there's the potential to derail a whole climb. And that happened once where I had a mixed episode at base camp and I had to like pull the chute and go home. And when you're talking about a lot of money being spent to put these expeditions in motion and the marketing and media and all that stuff, I mean, it's a business. That's a big deal. And so what I've had to do is really examine and even now I'm very much still in process, really examine the motivations behind all of this stuff, because if your motivations are off, you're going to amass and sort of internalize a huge degree of stress because you're going against your basic intuition. And once that stress becomes toxic and spills over and you move into your parasympathetic or your sympathetic nervous system, you're going to have a collapse at some point. So aligning values and genuine intuition with your pathway forward, specifically in high risk endeavors, is essential. And I've made missteps there before. So for me, it's really examining, okay, does this feel right? Does it feel in alignment with what I really want to do? Or am I trying to force a narrative? And if it's the latter, you're basically asking for a meltdown, if that makes any sense. Did I answer your question? I think I did.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, and also thank you for sharing that. Like, yes, I understand that. That again, when it comes to mental health and when it comes to sharing experiences, even though we may, as a community, as the mental health community, as human beings, we may share similar diagnosis. Everybody's experience is different. And there is someone out there who is listening to this. Like the questions at the end of the day, these are here just so we have a guide rail. Yeah. To hear all of that, there's somebody who is listening and who is going to connect with that on such a personal level. You're going to put their feelings into words that they have not heard yet, and it is going to make their life better. So thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the point of all of this, is trying to give people a language and invite them into a space where they feel safe to share with people that are safe to them. And, you know, that's why I've chosen to step out so openly about what I deal with. It's not to say that everybody should do that. It's just to say that when we example that, it becomes easier for people to say, okay, this is what it's like for me, and I'm experiencing this. And that's so important.
Yeah. So after hearing all of this, and this will come to a point, I had a moment. So I was in the 2016 Olympics for gymnastics, and I was 16 at the time, and I was struggling with lots of disordered eating habits and things like that. And post games, even years later, the amount of people that were like, wow, like that was your greatest shape yet, and just making lots of comments of like, you were so strong. And meanwhile, I wasn't eating very much. I wasn't really eating at all. And yet I was hearing, look how strong you look at how lean you look. And it ended up being one of the most mentally really difficult moments in my life. And I'm curious if, you know, a decade ago, a particularly risky expedition led to one of your most celebrated photos ever, but it also, from what I understand, triggered another shift in your mental health. And if you don't mind sharing that story, I'd love to hear it.
Well, first of all, I really can resonate with what you just said in different ways. I mean, I think it's important for men to say out loud, like, I've struggled a lot with disordered eating, specifically more body dysmorphia because of the community that I've been a part of. And so I really resonate with that. But also there's a sense of being told constantly, like, you have the best job in the world. And if you don't feel that, you almost feel guilty.
Yeah.
That you're like, yes, I'm in the Olympics and I sort of in some ways hate it,
and I'm in hell.
And I'm in hell. And so it's weird when people are like, oh my gosh, National Geographic Climate, like you have the best job. And you're like, wow, if you could see the internal landscape of my brain, maybe you'd think differently, but that's normal. So I want to answer your question. When I was, it was 2010, 11, I was 29 years old. I went to climb a mountain called Gasherbrum 2 in Pakistan, on the border of Pakistan and India. It's the 13th highest mountain in the world. And there are 14 8,000 meter peaks in the world. And 9 of them sit in India and Nepal on the border of China. And 5 of them are in Pakistan. And in the 1980s, there was a big shift where people started trying to climb these peaks in winter because, okay, they had all been climbed. Now let's make it even harder. And so the 9 in the southern part of the Himalaya had all been climbed in winter. And somewhat appropriately, because the Karakoram Himalaya of Pakistan is 600 miles north, none of those had been climbed in winter. There had been 16 expeditions over 26 years. People had died. And so when we went to climb Gasherbrum 2, it was a winter expedition, and we became the first team to climb one of the Pakistani 8,000 meter peaks in winter. And I am still the only American to climb any of the 8,000 meter peaks in winter. Ironically, at the time, I didn't know any of that. I just was following 2 people that I was wildly enamored with as climbing heroes. And they asked me to come as a photographer and storyteller. So I did. And on the descent, we got caught in a very big storm, and then we got hit by an avalanche as we were moving from Camp 1 down to base camp. And it hit us. Really, what's amazing about avalanches is the air blast they throw out in front of them. It actually is, it's incredibly powerful. And so this avalanche came down off a mountain called Gasherbrum 5 and hit us on flat ground. And what happens is all that force comes down and it blows the air out in front of it. And so the brunt of the snow was not what actually picked us up and threw us. It was the air and all the ice and detritus and debris around that. And so we were all partially buried. And I was pretty certain that, Simone and Dennis had died, and this was happening over sort of a 30-second time frame, which feels like a lifetime and also less than a second, because time has this really funny way of dilating when you're in near-death scenarios. And long story short, we all survived. All of us were partially buried. We were all able to get out. And a few minutes later, I took a photograph, or about an hour later, when we were walking down, getting closer to base camp, and there was a little bit of safety, I turned the camera on myself and I took a photograph. And it was a selfie, and it ended up getting printed on the cover of National Geographic magazine. And it became, I think, my most widely celebrated photo. And it really, that expedition launched my career. I was working really hard. I was grinding hard as an outdoor adventure photographer. And then all of a sudden it launched me into sort of the spotlight of adventure sport, right as that was making its debut on in pop culture worldwide, right? Global pop culture. And so it was this massive, it was this big takeoff. And so my career skyrocketed, and all of a sudden I started to really unravel. And what it was acute post-traumatic stress disorder from a near-death experience that the brain interprets exactly the same, whether it's a combat incident, whether it's a car accident, whether it's, God forbid, rape. Like, what happens in the brain is identical in those situations. So there's no discernment between this is more or less important as per the values that our culture places on it, which is problematic in trauma because we tend to place a higher level of importance on certain kinds of transgressions or combat, right? Well, like that matters because of what you were doing. But the truth is that the biochemical reaction of the brain and the processes that take place are indistinguishable. And so here's this radical trajectory going up in one way and down in another. And so over the next few years, I noticed memory loss, anger, disassociation, and ultimately resulting in a lot of sort of substance and behavior abuse to try to calm that constant spinning when the brain gets caught in the sympathetic nervous system. And so that really colored my journey going forward with mental health as well.
Wow, that sounds terrifying.
It was. It was.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. And what an experience to have reflected on such a scary moment for you, and for that to be everywhere. I know it's exactly what we just talked about, but for that to be a photo that is recognized and that exploded, and yet it was this moment of, am I still here?
Yeah. Well, and the brain just doesn't know how to make sense of that. And so oftentimes people with trauma, they'll revisit the same scenarios over and over and over again, trying to resolve the trauma in a different way. Because some very specific things and interesting things happen biochemically when the brain prepares for death or when it's very threatened, right? Mm-hmm. And it creates blockages that we then are constantly trying to unravel. And not coincidentally, people with developmental trauma, like violence in the home, abuse, neglect, abandonment, are more likely, because of what they've experienced in the past, to experience an acute episode of post-traumatic stress disorder, given any situation. So some people, like Simone and Dennis, didn't have any of that afterwards. They were just like, cool, great, like it happens, we're in the mountains. And then there's me, and my career is going so fast upwards, and my personal life is just completely dissolving underneath me. So yeah, it was and honestly, it's 11 years later, I think I honestly think I'm still unpacking it all.
Yeah. The thing is, I think the biggest the biggest trap that I put myself into when I first started therapy, when I had done like sports psychology and things like that. But my biggest trap at 19 was thinking that healing had a finish line, and that there was going to come this moment where I'd wake up one day and I'd be like, would you look at that, God, I'm healed. We're going to live our lives to the fullest. I am not going to blink the wrong way ever again. My responses are going to be perfect. I'm going to be perfect. I'm going to feel emotions in the perfect way. And damn, was I wrong?
Aren't we though? I mean, it's crazy.
Like, yes. And this naiveness that I'm going to be somehow better, that I'm going to be healed, and that is just not it. The human experience is messy and it is complex, and every brain handles things differently. But the one core thing about post-traumatic stress, as someone who grew up in an 11-year environment of emotional and verbal abuse as a kid, that was such a weird thing to tinker with and to dissect, because it's like, I'm being yelled at, okay, cool, and it's like, even years later, not that it doesn't matter how much time, but there's this acknowledgement that it happened and that it was scary. And these experiences that you've had are especially physical experiences. Of course, it's going to sometimes come up. That is just how the brain works. It is also extremely validating to hear, because when it doesn't come up, it should not feel like a failure, like that we didn't get to the healing line. It's not that at all,
Well, and I think also, I'm writing a book right now about my life and about really it's about mental health, but it
I'm going
is.
to read the hell out of that, by the way.
Thank you. I can't. Well, we'll do another one when it comes out, but
Yeah.
it really is about the trajectory of mental health and how the brain forms and how you can even be in a deeply loving household. Like my parents, like I said, they were some of the kindest, best people, and they are best people I know.
Yeah.
I love my brother dearly. And mental health is transcendent of all the external guardrails that we tend to put on it. Yes, I was born a middle class white American man. So I win like by the metrics of the shittiness of the world. In some ways I sort of win this awful lottery that people then say, well, you had all the legs up, and that's true in some ways, and I have to own that. And at the same time, the machinations of the brain, they don't give up about that. They just so, and there can be nuance in a family that a parent can be like, well, I never abandoned you, but there's behaviors that end up making a child feel a very specific way that end up actually presenting as abandonment. And it's not to say that parents or siblings did anything necessarily wrong. It's just to say that this happened and that resulted in a certain set of psychological action and reaction that has shaped the neurochemical and neurobiology of my brain. And so there's a big sense of like, let's walk back the blame here. Just because things happen and just because people acted in certain ways doesn't mean that they're to blame, and nor does it mean that anybody did anything quote unquote wrong, even though maybe they did too. It's just to say it's much more gray than that. And we have to make space for that.
You can see more of Cory's amazing work at coryrichards.com. Now, for a quick look at one of the many mental health apps on the market, I spoke earlier with our team at One Mind Cyber Guide. Joining me now is Dr. Stephen Schuler, the Executive Director of One Mind Cyber Guide. Stephen, thank you so much for being here today to talk about one of the most popular apps on the market, the Calm app. What is mindfulness meditation?
Mindfulness meditation is really a practice of having focused attention, and you can do it in a lot of different ways. I think a lot of people think about mindfulness meditation as like deep breathing or yoga, but you can really have focused attention in all different aspects of your life.
Who might it be helpful for and how?
Mindfulness meditation can be helpful for all varieties of people. It really is an opportunity to slow down and really take the time for yourself in the busyness of the day. So I think it can be really helpful for people who feel stressed, busy, or really having challenges, really getting in the zone in different aspects of their life.
Tell us a little bit about the app itself. It features a large library of meditation content. What else?
Yeah, Calm is packed full of different content. They have over 100 guided meditations. They have different educational content. They have a wisdom section where you can learn new things. They have music or soundscapes, different aspects for different aspects, parts of your life. There's a move section to get you involved in physical activity. There's a for work section for content related to your workplace. So it really is a library of all kinds of different information that is under the umbrella of mindfulness meditation.
Sounds like a jack of all trades for the brain.
That is indeed.
Many people turn to apps for help with sleep. Can this app help with sleep?
Yeah, so there's research evidence that supports that individuals who use Calm have actually had improved sleep, especially in that like pre-sleep period, helping you kind of decompress and get ready for sleep. It can be really helpful for that. And some of the ways it does that is by having a library of nighttime meditations. These can be sleep stories or background music, or just different things that really help you get ready to sleep, which is really important in helping promote better and healthier sleep.
I will definitely be using that. A little birdie told me that there's even a special section for kids. Is that true?
That is true. And kids love it. They have different mindfulness meditations that are narrated by kid favorite characters. There are Transformers, there are My Little Ponies. My kids love My Little Ponies. I didn't even know these things were still around, but there are all these different characters. There's also classic fairy tales like Beauty and the Beast and Dr. Dolittle. So these are translated into stories, mindfulness meditations, lullabies that really help transition kids into sleep as well.
Love that. What about tracking? Is there a way for users to keep track of all their progress?
You can. There's many different features that help you see what streaks you're on. And we know that streaks are really valuable to keep people going, to see, how many days in a row you've done this mindfulness meditation. You can also see material or content that you favorited or downloaded to store on the app itself, so you can have it more easily accessible to you. And all of that is available to you in this history section of Calm.
How about the cost? Is it a subscription model?
So if you're interested in trying out Calm, they do have a 7-day free trial period. And then after that, it's either $14.99 a month or $69.99 for a full year. You can also purchase a lifetime access to the app for a one-time cost of $399.99. Now, I'll also say a lot of folks have Calm available to them through their employees or other different services that they get. So you also might want to check if Calm is available to you through different avenues.
That is very good to know. The CyberGuide website is a great online resource to find out about all the many mental health apps on the market. How do you rate each app, and what is the criteria?
So we use 3 criteria to evaluate apps at One Mind CyberGuide. We look at the credibility, the degree to which there's evidence that this app might help you, the user experience, and transparency around data security and privacy. And Calm scores a 4.67 out of 5 on our credibility scale, a 4.4 out of 5 on our user experience scale, and is acceptable in terms of data security and privacy. So this is a very high scoring app, but you can also go to onemindcyberguide.org for more information on it.
Incredible. Thank you, Stephen. Viewers, thank you too. For more details and information, visit onemindcyberguide.org. Bye, everyone. Have a great day.
I'm living my best life.